As I say, it was not difficult to take a reasonable position on this particular issue. Now, I understand President Trump was out there saying that Bob Mueller was corrupt, that the entire investigation was corrupt, that it was a witch hunt and all of the rest. And you didn't have to believe that. You also didn't have to believe that the media, that their narrative, that President Trump was a Russian asset, like Kevin Costner in No Way Out. You didn't have to believe that either. You know what you could have said? Why don't we just wait? And then the evidence will come out. Now, not to brag or anything, but this was the only reasonable position in all of this. Okay, the truly reasonable position was, I don't know. I said this to Bill Maher, and Bill Maher couldn't believe it. Do you actually think that Donald Trump colluded with Vladimir Putin?
Yes.
Do you?
You don't? How can you not? Well, I don't think he did it, but his son did it. The people who Mueller is
and when
indicting.
the evidence comes out, I'm happy to go for the indictments. I'm fine with the indictments.
Great.
Criminal activity is criminal activity.
But you see
That's
what
fine.
you see.
But I'm not going to attribute to Trump something he didn't do when he's too ignorant to have done it. I'm happy to wait for the Mueller indictments. And if they come down and they target Trump, I'm happy to see him impeached. But I need to see evidence. Where's the evidence? Mueller is the one who matters here. Not Rosenstein,
but Mueller's report
Sessions.
goes to the Deputy Attorney General. And if Trump puts Scott Baio in that position, he can just throw it in the trash.
And if he throws it in the trash or quashes the Mueller investigation, then yes, impeachment should be on the table. Okay, so I said all of this stuff, and this was a reasonable position that the left could have taken, but instead they decided to get way out over their skis. Trump was definitely a Russian asset. You heard Bill Maher say that. And on Friday night, he said the same thing. I don't care what the report says. This is the way it's going to go. I don't care what the report says. In the end, what matters is that I believe my narrative, and my narrative suggests that President Trump is guilty. Guilty, 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 guilty. Okay, all of this brings us to the actual Barr report. So I'm going to read you the entirety of the Barr report. Why? Because you should have access to all of the information before us. You shouldn't be reading the media headlines. You shouldn't be listening to any of the pundits. What you should be doing is listening to the actual words of the Barr report. And I will stop and I will explain what exactly the Barr report says, so you know everything. Okay, we are still awaiting the full Barr release of as much of the Mueller report as he can. But here's the letter that he sent to the heads of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate and in the House. Dear Chairman Graham, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Feinstein, and Ranking Member Collins, as a supplement to the notification provided on Friday, March 22, 2019, I am writing today to advise you of the principal conclusions reached by Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III and to inform you about the status of my initial review of the report he has prepared. Section 1, the Special Counsel's report. On Friday, the Special Counsel submitted to me a confidential report explaining the prosecution or declination decisions he has reached as required by 28 CFR Section 600.8c. This report is entitled Report on the Investigation into Russian Interference in the 2016 Presidential Election. Although my review is ongoing, I believe that it is in the public interest to describe the report and to summarize the principal conclusions reached by the Special Counsel and the results of his investigation. The report explains that the Special Counsel and his staff thoroughly investigated allegations that members of the presidential campaign of Donald J. Trump and others associated with it conspired with the Russian government in its efforts to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, or sought to obstruct the related federal investigations. In the report, the Special Counsel noted that, in completing his investigation, he employed 19 lawyers who were assisted by a team of approximately 40 FBI agents, intelligence analysts, forensic accountants, and other professional staff. The Special Counsel issued more than 2,800 subpoenas, executed nearly 500 search warrants, obtained more than 230 orders for communications records, issued almost 50 orders authorizing use of pen registers, made 13 requests to foreign governments for evidence, and interviewed approximately 500 witnesses. That's pretty damn thorough, guys. So you're hearing, one of the arguments you're hearing from the left is, you know what? We need more investigations. We need the House to look into this. The House Judiciary Committee, they can be trusted. Mueller was bought and paid for, guys. Probably this is just William Barr and Trump secretly manipulating behind the scenes. 2,800 subpoenas and 500 witnesses. Pretty sure they talked to everybody. The Special Counsel obtained a number of indictments and convictions of individuals and entities in connection with this investigation, all of which have been publicly disclosed. During the course of his investigation, the Special Counsel also referred several matters to other offices for further action. The report does not recommend any further indictments, nor did the Special Counsel obtain any sealed indictments that have yet to be made public. Below, I summarize the principal conclusions set out in the Special Counsel's report. Drum roll, please. Section 2, Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The Special Counsel's report is divided into two parts, writes William Barr, the Attorney General. The first describes the results of the special counsel's investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The report outlines the Russian effort to influence the election and documents crimes committed by persons associated with the Russian government in connection with those efforts. The report further explains that a primary consideration for the special counsel's investigation was whether any Americans, including individuals associated with the Trump campaign, joined the Russian conspiracies to influence the election, which would be a federal crime. The special counsel's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Period. End of paragraph. Guys, that's a no on the collusion. That's a clear statement of no. Now, are the media accepting this? No, of course not. The media are suggesting that maybe Barr is shading the results here. Maybe there's something nefarious going on. That's one of my favorite arguments, is that Barr is somehow lying about what Mueller actually turned into him. I will remind you that Robert Mueller forcefully came out and denounced a BuzzFeed story that lied about what the investigation was going to find. So he is not shy. If it turns out that Barr is lying, we would have known that already. The report continues. As the report states, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Now, the way that the left is reading this is they are saying that if the investigation did not establish it, then maybe there were some indicators that maybe they were trying or something like that. Okay, here's the reality. If Bob Mueller had been unsure about this conclusion, if he had thought that there was evidence that could have gone either way sufficient to sustain a prosecution, then Bob Mueller would have written that, because that is what he wrote about obstruction of justice. But that is not what he wrote when it came to Russian collusion. The special counsel's investigation determined that there were two main Russian efforts to influence the 2016 election. The first involved attempts by a Russian organization, the Internet Research Agency, the IRA, to conduct disinformation and social media operations in the United States designed to sow social discord, eventually with the aim of interfering with the election. As noted above, the special counsel did not find that any U.S. person or Trump campaign official or associate conspired or knowingly coordinated with the IRA in its efforts, although the special counsel brought criminal charges against a number of Russian nationals and entities in connection with these activities. The second element involved in the Russian government's efforts to conduct computer hacking operations designed to gather and disseminate information to influence the election. This is the hack on John Podesta and the DNC. The special counsel found that Russian government actors successfully hacked into computers and obtained emails from persons affiliated with the Clinton campaign and Democratic Party organizations, and publicly disseminated those materials through various intermediaries, including WikiLeaks. Based on these activities, the special counsel brought criminal charges against a number of Russian military officers for conspiring to hack into computers in the United States for purposes of influencing the election. But, as noted above, the special counsel did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in these efforts, despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. That presumably would be a reference to the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting. There's a footnote here. It says, in assessing potential conspiracy charges, the special counsel also considered whether members of the Trump campaign coordinated with Russian election interference activities. The special counsel defined coordination as an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. In other words, there was no secret deal. No secret deal. Headline number one, no collusion. Just didn't exist. No collusion. Okay, in 1 second, we're going to get to the second issue, obstruction of justice. And I'll explain how the media are even now trying to fib about this one, because they simply can't accept the L. Take the L, guys. It's pretty obvious what you did here. The report from William Barr continues on obstruction of justice. The report's second part addresses a number of actions by the president, most of which have been the subject of public reporting, that the special counsel investigated as potentially raising obstruction of justice concerns. After making a thorough factual investigation into these matters, the special counsel considered whether to evaluate the conduct under department standards governing prosecution and declination decisions, but ultimately determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. The special counsel therefore did not draw a conclusion one way or the other as to whether the examined conduct constituted obstruction. So the special counsel did not say, we decline to prosecute, or he should be prosecuted. Instead, he said, listen, I don't know. It's all public. If this is impeachable stuff, go for it. If not, then not. But it's hard to imagine there's an impeachment for obstruction when there's no underlying crime. What exactly would Trump have been trying to obstruct? Again, one of my contentions the entire time is that Bob Mueller was not obstructed by President Trump. James Comey admitted that the investigation was not obstructed by President Trump. Trump tweeting random crap out there does not constitute obstruction. We have covered this at length on the show. Instead, says Barr, for each of the relevant actions investigated, the report sets out evidence on both sides of the question and leaves unresolved what the special counsel views as difficult issues of law and fact concerning whether the president's actions and intent could be viewed as obstruction. The special counsel states that, quote, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. And this is the line that the media have been focusing in on. Ooh, it doesn't exonerate him. It doesn't exonerate him. So that means that even if he didn't commit a crime, maybe he's guilty of something. Okay, now here's the reality. We all know what President Trump did here. President Trump put pressure publicly on the Mueller investigation, but behind closed doors, he didn't actually stop anything having to do with the Mueller investigation. Him fulminating on Twitter does not amount to obstruction. Him telling people internally that he'd like to fire Bob Mueller does not amount to obstruction. Him talking about how he'd like this investigation to end. Him talking about how he fired James Comey because he was ticked off with the whole thing. None of that amounts to obstruction. So that is controversial, but it is not controversial from a legal point of view. If Mueller thought that this was an open and shut obstruction case, then he would presumably have recommended charging for obstruction. Now, a bunch of people on the left saying, well, you can't charge a president with obstruction. That's what he's really saying, that if he weren't president, he'd be charging him with obstruction. That's not what Barr says. What Barr says is that the report does not conclude that the president committed a crime. It doesn't exonerate him because you can't exonerate in a case of sort of public view. What's hilarious about all of this is people saying, well, the president shouldn't be exonerated because obstruction of justice, I mean, that even amounts to the president not wanting to talk to Mueller. No, that's called like a normal legal defense. As a lawyer, the first rule is shut your client up. I've been saying this about Rudy Giuliani since the very beginning. Dude, get your guy to shut up. The special counsel's decision to describe the facts of his obstruction investigation without reaching any legal conclusions leaves it to the Attorney General to determine whether the conduct described in the report constitutes a crime. This is the normal way things work. Now, people are saying, oh, well, William Barr stepped in and shut down the possibility of an investigation, shut down the possibility of a charge here. You know why? Because that's the DOJ's job. You know what you're not supposed to do is what James Comey did with Hillary Clinton. What he should have done is what Mueller did here. He should have said, here are all the facts, laying them out. Now it's up to you, Loretta Lynch, and if you want to shut this thing down, then it's on your head. Well, the same thing happened here for Mueller. Over the course of the investigation, the special counsel's office engaged in discussions with certain department officials regarding many of the legal and factual matters at issue in the special counsel's obstruction investigation. After reviewing the special counsel's final report on these issues, consulting with department officials, including the Office of Legal Counsel, and applying the principles of federal prosecution that guide our charging decisions, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Now remember, this is Rosenstein going along with the sue. President Trump's been ripping on Rosenstein. So is the implication here that both Barr and Rosenstein are compromised? As you'll see, the media say yes. Our determination was made without regard to and is not based on the constitutional considerations that surround the indictment and criminal prosecution of a sitting president. In other words, it has nothing to do with he's the president, so he can't obstruct justice. This is just not obstruction of justice, is what Barr is saying. In making this determination, we noted that the special counsel recognized that the evidence does not establish that the president was involved in an underlying crime related to Russian election interference, so hard to obstruct an investigation into a crime that doesn't exist, and that while not determinative, the absence of such evidence bears upon the president's intent with respect to obstruction. Generally speaking, to obtain and sustain an obstruction conviction, the government would need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person acting with corrupt intent is an element of the crime and obstruction, engaged in obstructive conduct with a sufficient nexus to a pending or contemplated proceeding. Right? That is the state of the law. I've described it multiple times on the show. In cataloging the president's actions, many of which took place in public view, the report identifies no actions that, in our judgment, constitute obstructive conduct, had a nexus to a pending or contemplated proceeding, and were done with corrupt intent, each of which, under the department's principles of federal prosecution guiding charging decisions, would need to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt to establish an obstruction of justice offense. In other words, President Trump says a lot of crap. That's the short version. Trump says a lot of crap. And because he says a lot of crap, we can't just say he's exonerated on this, but we also are not going to charge him for saying a lot of crap, because saying a lot of crap, it ain't a crime. Okay, final section of this report from William Barr. The status of the department's review. The relevant regulations contemplate that the special counsel's report will be a confidential report to the Attorney General. As I have previously stated, however, I am mindful of the public interest in this matter. For that reason, my goal and intent is to release as much of the special counsel's report as I can, consistent with applicable law, regulations, and departmental policies. Based on my discussions with the special counsel and my initial review, it is apparent that the report contains material that is or could be subject to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E, which imposes restrictions on the use and disclosure of information relating to matters occurring before a grand jury. Rule 6E generally limits disclosure of certain grand jury information in a criminal investigation and prosecution. Disclosure of 6E material beyond the strict limits set forth in the rule is a crime in certain circumstances. In other words, I can't just PDF the whole report and put it online. That's a violation of the basic rules of criminal procedure. This restriction protects the integrity of grand jury proceedings and ensures that the unique and invaluable investigative powers of a grand jury are used strictly for their intended criminal justice function. Given these restrictions, the schedule for processing the report depends in part on how quickly the department can identify the 6E material that by law cannot be made public. I have requested the assistance of the special counsel in identifying all 6E information contained in the report as quickly as possible. In other words, he's going to ask Bob Mueller what he's allowed to reveal. So again, this is not Barr trying to redact crap he can't redact. Separately, I also must identify any information that could impact other ongoing matters, including those that the special counsel has referred to other offices. As soon as that process is complete, I will be in a position to move forward expeditiously in determining what can be released in light of applicable law, regulations, and departmental policies. As I observed in my initial notification, the special counsel regulations provide that the Attorney General may determine that public release of notifications to your respective committees would be in the public interest. I have so determined, and I will disclose this letter to the public after delivering it to you. Sincerely, William Barr, Attorney General. Okay, that's the entirety of the letter, so you have now heard it from beginning to end. So now you can make up your own mind on what the media are telling you about all of this. Suffice it to say, my belief is that the media are deliberately attempting to shade this report because they humiliated themselves. There's not just egg on their face. They went to a chicken farm. They took every egg in the chicken farm. They shattered it over their own head. The egg covers them to the extent that they are now up to their nose in egg. And yet the media are going to continue to pretend that this was all done on the up and up, that they handled this exactly right. We're going to get to